I was born into a mafia family. Here's my story. You might be surprised to learn that mobsters aren't just a thing of the past. They are still very much with us today. In fact, there are thousands of them living here in America. These people make their money largely on illegal activities like extortion, gambling, and drug dealing, among others. They tend to stay out of the spotlight so as not to attract any unwanted attention from the authorities, but they have been known to get violent when crossed. So how do you escape a life of crime when you're born into one of these families? Stick around as we explore this question through the story of a Reddit user who had to flee for his life after he was born into a dangerous family. Welcome to our channel. If you're new here, subscribe for more stories like this one. Before we begin though, please take a moment to like this video. It really helps us out. Thanks for your support. I was born and raised in Little Italy in the early 80s. By the time I was 2 years old, my father was already a capo regime, or captain, in the Bonanno crime family. My grandfather was a consigliere under Don Carlo Gambino. So yeah, I guess you could say that I was born into the life. Even though my parents tried to keep me away from the family business, it was impossible given the nature of their work. For example, while I was growing up, we were constantly moving from place to place, never stayed in one spot for too long, because my dad always felt like someone was watching him. When I was 7 years old, we moved to an apartment near Shea Stadium. At the time, my dad was working for a guy named Fat Tony. Fat Tony controlled a crew of guys who would place sports bets for my father's crew. I also worked as a fence, selling stolen goods for my father's crew. But most of his money came from protecting various businesses in Queens, New York, from other criminals. You know what I mean? Like those guys would pay him so that they wouldn't have to deal with some other guy shaking them down. One day my parents decided to move again. This time we headed over to Staten Island. My father got a high-end job from Fat Tony, which paid him even better than before. Basically, my dad was responsible for making sure the garbage collectors on Staten Island didn't steal from Fat Tony's guys. He also made sure that all the garbage was collected as usual. As you can imagine, this wasn't hard since most of the guys collecting garbage were under Fat Tony's payroll. While we were living in Staten Island, my parents sent me to Our Lady of Perpetual Help School. Even though I knew that many of my classmates' parents were involved in the mob, I had no idea that my parents were too. I thought that my dad was just a regular guy who worked for the sanitation department. Looking back though, I realize now that he was probably getting tips from my classmates' dads about which houses had the most garbage for him to collect. Anyways, when I was 13, my father was arrested for tax evasion. This led to a massive FBI investigation that busted up Fat Tony's crew. Luckily for my dad, they didn't have enough evidence to arrest him. Still, my parents decided that it was best if we moved again. So we headed over to Brooklyn this time. By this point, I was well aware that my dad did something illegal for a living. The neighborhood that we moved to was full of guys with criminal records. Even some of my teachers at Lafayette High School had criminal records. Of course, they didn't teach us anything useful either. When I asked my algebra teacher how to solve a quadratic equation, she just told me to Google it. When I turned 16, my dad started teaching me the family business. He taught me everything there was to know about extortion, gambling, drug dealing, and how to collect debts. Most of the guys that I knew from childhood were now making money as drug dealers, so it seemed like a natural career choice for me. I even tested the waters a bit by stealing some money from my mom. She noticed that I took it though, and gave me a look that I never want to see again. That look is what I call the look, the look that moms give their kids when they know that they've done something wrong. It's the type of look that can chill you to the bone. My dad caught wind of this, and he chewed me out for taking money from my mother. He told me that if I ever stole from anyone else in the family, he'd cut me off without a second thought. According to him, if I ever left the family and went to the cops, he would have me whacked. But if I was going to make money for the family, he said that I shouldn't steal because that was a surefire way to get myself killed. I was still curious about the outside world though. When I graduated high school, I started taking night classes at Kingsborough Community College. While studying at Kingsborough, I met some great friends, and we started hanging out a lot. My favorite pastime was playing basketball with them. Unfortunately, my dad found out about this, and he told me to quit immediately. He told me that hanging around college students was dangerous, because they tend to talk to the cops sometimes. At first, I resisted a bit, but I eventually stopped seeing my friends and going to college. About a year later, one of my friends, Benny, called me up. He told me that he and his brother were going to rob a jewelry store on 47th Street. He invited me to join them, saying that I would only have to drive the getaway car. I couldn't help but wonder why I had to drive the getaway car. Like, why didn't I get to go inside and grab some loot? But before I could ask, Benny hung up the phone. I spent the next few days thinking about what he told me. I realized that I didn't want to spend the rest of my life as a mobster. I mean, I liked my friends and all, but I didn't want to be stuck doing stupid things forever, so I decided to leave the family. The moment my dad found out that I was leaving, he started yelling at me, calling me all sorts of names. He told me that once I left the house, I wouldn't be coming back. Then he handed me $500 and kicked me out. To this day, I don't know where he got that much money from, but I guess that stuff must have been easy back then. I moved in with Benny and his brother. It was tough at first, but I eventually found a job working construction. I saved up enough money to rent an apartment, and the rest is history. Today, I run a small business. I haven't spoken to any of my family members in over 30 years. Every once in a while, I hear about them in the news. For example, in 2015, my uncle was sentenced to 5 years in prison for drug trafficking. A few months later, my cousin was arrested for trying to bribe a cop. My cousin was also involved in a huge fight with some bikers in 2019. According to the police, the fight started after the bikers tried to extort some money from my cousin. They demanded $5,000 from him in exchange for protection. Instead of paying them, my cousin called up a friend who happened to be a capo regime in the Genovese crime family. This led to a massive brawl between the mobsters and the bikers. The police broke up the fight, and everyone was sent on their way. No charges were filed, though. Strange how, despite the threats my dad made, none of my family members have tried to hurt me. Perhaps they didn't want to draw attention to themselves by hurting a rat. Maybe they figured that if they hurt me, it would bring the heat down on them. Or maybe they simply forgot about me. Either way, I prefer not to think about it. If I had stayed in the family, I would probably be in jail or dead right now. I know for a fact that my cousin would have whacked me if I had stayed. He was that kind of guy. I know this because one time during a family dinner, I mentioned that I was tired of being treated like a child. My cousin leaned over and told me that if I left the family, I wouldn't be making any decisions for the next 24 hours. It turns out that last warning was actually a blessing in disguise. After reading this story, I gotta say that I feel bad for this guy. Not only did he grow up in a dangerous environment, but he was also threatened by his own father. I'm glad that he managed to escape the mob and live a normal life. But I can't help but wonder why his family didn't kill him after he left. Sure, they could have ignored his threats, but they could have also decided to silence him. Ultimately, though, it seems like he dodged a bullet there. What would you do if you were in this guy's position? Let us know in the comments below. That was the end of the episode. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more stories. See you next time.